part of a group of people who are sort of trying to advise on the Thames Gateway and how London is developing. And in the morning we had a brief presentation by Eusebio, who has had a lot of responsibility for the development of Barcelona, and just comparing really how Barcelona developed over the last 10 or 15 years compared to what has happened here and the sort of opportunities that we've had. It's really inspiring to see the nature of that kind of urban development. And of course, one of the main elements of that development in Barcelona has been this project for Forum 2004, where Jose Luis's project is one of the key elements of that development, alongside the projects of Herzog de Moron and others that I think you'll also see, hopefully, at a later date. I think Jose Luis is probably the first architect who, in my opinion, in some ways breaks away from what we knew in the 80s or early 90s as the sort of tradition of Spanish architecture, where we had these books published about contemporary Spanish architecture, which was really rooted in the continuity of certain traditions of modernism. And I think then Jose Luis comes along, and he really operates in a very different fashion, because his work is very much rooted in ideas about construction and commitment to building, but at the same time he has enormous range of other interests. So his notions of physicality are always in some way conjoined with those of ephemerality, temporality. He speaks about light, the way things are changing, and in a sense I think it's established a different kind of tradition, if you like, of Spanish architecture. And for example, the exhibition that we had here not so long ago from Avalos and Herreros, you could say that there is another set of kind of tendencies that are developing, which owe a great deal to what Jose Luis has established, and of course what he did during his period as the editor of Quaderns, which really was truly one of the most significant, and I think it's probably still continues to this day, publications, journals of architecture. In addition to all these achievements, of course, Jose Luis has been a very important teacher of architecture, and more recently he has been appointed a permanent professor of architecture at the ETH in Zurich. So without any further delay, would you please welcome Jose Luis Mateo.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So thank you, Moses, for your kind introduction, and thank you all of you for being here tonight. Confronted to my lecture tonight, in a way that I was asked to show some kind of some interest on my production now. In a way, these kind of lectures are always means acting like a radiography at a certain moment, but it's a kind of temporal radiography on our production. And in this moment I was thinking, because that was really difficult to me to imagine what I have to explain and how to do that. And I would like to explain also my doubts. Because at the end, in our professional activities, we are confronted to three kinds of materials, three kinds of arguments or materials, elements. One material is connected to our former works. This is acting in a way like phantoms that are following you, and in a way, even if we wanted to escape from them, it's not always so easy to do that. And in a way, you have some kind of presence of something you have done more or less recently. So it's a kind of final projects you have already done, and you must escape from them, and you try to escape from them. But even a way for escaping from them is just talking in these lectures, because at the end yourself you are becoming so bored from your own work that you really put them into a kind of box, closed box outside you. So one material is connected to former, let's say, buildings, not projects, buildings. The second kind of material is connected to the designs we are doing. So the designs we are doing, and I mean with different kinds of problems connected to the strategies, to cultural, let's say, questions, to pragmatical questions, to political questions, to problems connected to the graphic ways of expressions, I mean, even special tools for researching, etc. So this is a kind of work you, as a student, you more or less know, because it's in a way it's a kind of typical architectural production. So this is designs. And the third field we are confronted into the professional, into our professional activity, is something that I will say is in a crude way, but is basically building, is construction, is the fact of building. And this, I have to say, this third part of the tale, I always found absolutely exciting, in a way, absolutely exciting, absolutely relevant, absolutely fundamental, thinking really that the relationship in between ideas and the materials, and the ideas and the facts, is not an easy relationship, and it's not a linear relationship in a way. It's a kind of dialectical connection in between ideas, architectural ideas, and architectural facts, architectural objects, architectural physical objects, that at the end all our buildings are connected to this kind of physical conditions. The physical condition of things is in a way fundamental question. So on the time of construction, to me, is almost never is a kind of an easy way, a linear way, a peaceful way that could be really at the center of the world. So this is the construction time, the third time. So in this moment, I have to say I am basically dealing with all of three. Of course, I have my phantoms. I'm going to show some very quickly. Just I'm trying to avoid them, looking at them in the next future. And we are dealing, of course, with designing, and we are dealing with big building sites, big, huge, enormous building activities. And this is, I have to say, I love in one hand, but also as an intellectual energy in a way. It's not a building is an intellectual problem. It's a cultural problem to us. It's even a social problem, a historical. It's a kind of collective energy that is connected to the action. And this is something that I really love as an architect. And in a way, even if I started being a critic or editor or something like that, I am basically a professional architect because I love being from this kind of rude men dealing with heavy things like building. So I am going to start just with this kind of phantom things. With two, because even the existing buildings, even if they are, Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher, said that the builder is a melancholical man, because building, when you build something, when you finish something, there is something like a melancholy connected to the finishing something, to the object, to the real finished object. And this is really like that, because Nietzsche said that when you do something, in the process, you have discovered something, that you really realize that you really will need to learn, to have to know from the early beginning before you started. So it's a kind of hidden melancholy all the time in the. But next to the melancholy, there are clearly, maybe too clear, some the expression of some ideas in buildings. And I'm going to show very quickly two of them. One is connected. The two are connected to landscape and to nature, to cosmic forces, to forces of the landscape. This is connected to a project in Amsterdam in the harbor. Just for explaining you how the site in this a site in between the sky and water. So in fact the land it doesn't exist. It's an artificial land, like almost the whole country. So this kind of material condition of the place, that it was in between air and liquid, that was something absolutely fundamental to our project. So this trying to deal with this kind of, let's say, non-solid or solid, but without a wish or being more fluid in a way. You know? So the whole thing, the whole project, not just in terms of materials, but also in terms of space and in terms of ideas of design. So this is a kind of the building there. Maybe you know it's a kind of massive piece with holes, with a certain rules, connections to the. This is a housing project with luxury housing with halls, cours, private cours, and so on. It established a kind of a strategy of limits, like making a border north, connection moment, ending moment, and a center. So it's a piece that I wanted to have a certain unity, formal unity, in relationship to having a starting, an ending, and a center also, and not just a kind of addition of parts. All the houses have the landscape is repeating into the roof, so and the material is also connected to that. This kind of material that is in between solid and lighter and light. The wood, for instance, the wood was also decided in relationship to the ships in some kind of contextual and even strategical decisions, because the client was a builder, a wood builder, a very good one. So we could define a new strategies for dealing with wood, establishing this kind of half permeable facade. And in the rear side, in the north side, maybe we could put a little bit less light in the room, because I think it's, maybe the images can be more. And so there's a kind of transition in between solidity and light. No? So this is a connection in between stone and bricks. Bricks and wood. Huh? And even the houses were also defined in this kind of dialogue in between light, air, and space. And for instance, this is a kind of one house with the difference, with the connections to the outside connected to the windows, with this kind of jalousies, this kind of open, half closed facade, a kind of winter garden, and also a light coming from above. Because the whole thing, at the end, the whole cover was like a village in a way. All the houses had a kind of garden, green garden here. This is north houses, glass garden. From here you have light underneath, and on the whole area is transformed into a kind of domestic landscape when you arrive into the roof. So it's a kind of this metaphor or this connection to the landscape and to the cosmic forces also acts as a practical fact for the inhabitants of the different houses, that they have a lot of let's say private outside space. Another house, and also dramatically dealing with the cosmic forces of the landscape. This is in a place with a lot of wind, with dramatic hurricanes from the north, and very warm in the summertime. At the end, has not been built, even if it's in Mallorca, because of these reasons. It's in an open bay, so the weather is very intense and very dramatic. And the house is trying to deal with this kind of weather and natural and, let's say, cosmic forces. The whole plan is, there are some sections, I'm not going to explain, but the whole idea of the house is, for instance, this is just like a big wall protecting from the wind, from the north wind in the rear, a kind of small and calmer court. This is the section of the space of the living room that has this kind of chimney section in order to have all the warm air arriving here and producing a natural ventilation without having any mechanical things. This is a small course trying to avoid having the direct sun into the house. This is a big cantilever also for the same. And so wind and sun, but also some kind of formal presence because it's a rocky mountain, the whole thing. And the building is a kind of geometrical crystalline form in relationship to this. This is the blue. The blue area is the big wall connected to the big wind, to the big wind protection. So it's a higher element protecting the rest of the house from the wind. And the whole area is this kind of rocky mountain with almost no vegetation, and the house is a kind of cubic and crystalline and geometrical inorganical reading of this kind of geological presence, with some detailing like domestical and very like African, North African things of connecting from the having possibilities having light inside. But the house is also because at the end the house is using this kind of landscape as a spectacle, because it's a domestic house, it's a kind of weekends house. So you are there, and the house at the living area is absolutely transparent, like here. So this is the south area, and the north on the other side, and the house is coming from north to south in a fluent way, like here. So this is a small court protected by the wall from the, and also open to the north side, windy and sea side. Some stupid things like we are doing now. This is another kind. This is our old object. This is a very new one. This is something produced last week or something like that. We are designing a furniture. We are designing a bank in Spain. This is a kind of the fourth Spanish bank, the Bank de Sabadell, and we are designing a kind of furniture, connect pieces from the bank, like special things, like funny things, like special for special purposes. This is a table with wheels for the public areas, for the place where the people are arriving, and having big chairs that we are also designing. And we are designing this kind of allegory in between the yin and yang Chinese principle, the two levels, and maybe it's easier to see. This is the yin and yang thing, and this is also dealing with the name of the bank, that is Diez, Diez of the Sabadell, Diez letter, and this is also a kind of joke in relationship to the entrance. There's a kind of more festive and ironic presence object in between many others we are designing with other kind of roles. This is going to be just a project into this kind of series. Even this is only the design. This is already designed and no more tension yet. It's starting the tension, but no more tension. This is a project in Portugal, and now it's starting construction. But I'm going to explain just as a project. This is a project that is dealing with the topography of the site. We have to design the center, the urban space of the center of the town. The town is Castelo Branco, Portugal, nearby at the end in the border, at the border. We designed the square, and also we designed a small building with an auditorium for Maria Joao Pires. Maria Joao Pires is a fantastic piano player. I think it's the best Bach pianist now, and she's from this town, and she has a house in this town, foundation, and this building is going to be as a kind of auditorium from the foundation, and she's going to play in there. So the landscape and the urban scheme is dealing, just as I said, with topography. So it's re-establishing a kind of new topography. So this is the existing one. We put basically for arranging a big parking underground with a shop here, and also arranging nearby this wall and proposing another building that somebody else is going to be. So we are going to have like a kind of big urban square, plaza, a strong one, and in the rear part is going to be a big park, a big forest. In between both is a sequence of buildings that were former barracks from the army, from the Portuguese army, actually against is placed in the border against Spain, and so it's a kind of the barracks from the army. Now is out of use, and next to that my building from Maria João Pires is appearing. So it's a kind of transition square, something in between, and a forest. This is the starting moment of this heavy moment of the action, of the brutality of the architectural technique. So this is the town, the limits, and this is the machines organizing with the fantastic granite rocks. The whole thing is granite, like everywhere in Portugal, like this stone here. And this is a little bit the surface of the square. These are the barracks from the army. This is the place for the auditorium and the small museum here. There's going to be here. The building, the project is something like that. It's absolutely elemental. It's just building the topography in one side, and dealing with very primitive and simple facts. For instance, the way you put all the water of the rain out of the square. So it's the whole water of the whole topography is going to this point. Here is going to appear a lake. This lake is going to be bigger or smaller in relationship to the rain season. So this is a kind of just a pave with a nice Portuguese way of doing, with this kind of small pieces with granite in colors. This is going to be basically a green area, a green band here. And here there are some small elements, like this a restaurant, this a tourist office, and this a big canopy connected to the restaurant and some exits from the parking. So it's a kind of absolutely, let's say, in my opinion, elementary, but with certain detail, urban space. Here, the new building is finishing the others, and dealing with the ending, and dealing also with the continuity of this space towards the other one, that is going to be the big forest, because this is going to be just a paved space. This is going to be just natural one, and in between our building is here. So that means that the building, this is some primitive ideas of the thing. So this is the lake, the green area in this band, and the primitive version of the building, that is a building that has no contact to the earth. So it's just a continuity, showing the continuity from one side to the other. So this is, you see a little bit more detailed with using these Portuguese materials, making this drawing. This drawing is showing the movements into the square, the normal movement into the square, difference of colors. The green, the lake, the canopy, and this building that is dealing in this side with the form of the space here, of the two blocks here, that is making this reaction there. And the whole building is a building, so the section is very small one, but I really like, because it's a kind of continuity of a space. So you have services underground. Here there is it's going to be a kind of patinoire. How do you say patinoire in English? This kind of with skating area. It's a cold place. It's a very cold place. So it's a skating area here. So this is the big facilities of the museum and the collective spaces. And here, you right to this plan, you have this kind of ramp and element like that. That is a small museum connected to the Contemporary Art Museum in Lisbon. It's a kind of showroom from this museum. And here is the small auditorium for Maria João Pires. So I mean, the whole thing is a kind of continuity from here until there, as a space, and also as a roof. So the roof is continuing as a facade and continuing as a ceiling here. So it's a kind of continuous band of outside ending, but also in terms of space. So some structural problems and dramas. So it's a big. So you see the plan. So this is the ground floor, the minus one. So when you arrive from the square going down, it's a big, regular and clear plan and free span and flexible space with some holes in order to have light. This is the level of the street. This is the level of the patinoire, of the skating area, with the vertical axis, the concrete staircase, the elevators and services elevators and so on. This is the floor with the ramp going up and the bottom of the auditorium. This is the. At the end, you arrive here. This is the foyer. You enter here. You went down. So the whole thing is just moving. It's a project that the whole thing was moving the floors and the ceilings and the roofs and even the facades. And doing that, just they organize the space like here. So this is a movement of the floor in relationship, a reaction of the ramp presence. This is a kind of possibility. The inside of the Maria Joao Pires. Maria Joao is very small, a very small woman, always dressed in black, and it's a very small auditorium. So it's just for a piano and 3 or 4 more people. And the whole thing is just a very black area scene, but a black theater, but the scene is white. So Maria Joao and the piano are going to be like floating, like in the film, in the Matrix, for instance. So these are like floating in between the space, changing absolutely the scale of the pianist. So this is the outside coming from the square, crossing the skating area. This is the entrance down, and this is the foyer entering to the auditorium. So the whole thing is empty, and so you can even feel the forest that is going to be on the other side in the second band. So children, these are nice. The children of the schools of Castelbranco last year, they made a kind of event defining the project, and they made the drawings very nice and even models. This is a kind of drawing made by the children in the town. This is another problem. We are close. We are coming into the the world of the construction and but we are still keeping in the conceptual area. This is a very old project. We start, I think, maybe I explained last time when I came here. I mean, 7 years or 8 years ago, 7 years ago. Because we won the competition at this moment, and we are going to finish now. So this is one of the things we are finishing now. This is a bank, a Bundesbank building. I mean, a central government bank. In Chemnitz, that was the older center in the old DDR in the East Germany. It was like Manchester. They said it was and it was in a forest. So it was it was put in a big park. In a big park. To me, I am from the south. The trees are always very small. It's like a forest, so it's a big trees, no light under the trees, etc. So and here the building has to be, and this is something. The rest, the Chemnitz was named Karl Marx Stadt. I mean, city Karl Marx in the east, in the DDR time. I mean, in fact, the center that is absolutely modern is fantastic. For example, this one. This is a head of Karl Marx, with this kind of big composition, with the starting moment of the Communist Manifest, and but this is a gigantic thing in a way, no? So this is a really epical thing with I don't know, 30 meters height, and this is maybe 20 or 15 meters high. So it's a kind of modernistic tradition connected to the DDR time. To me, this was an international competition. So to me, for dealing with this project, that I couldn't talk to this kind of modern architecture in this case, this moment, almost 10 years ago. The most fundamental thing to me was thinking in the forest, in a way, in this kind of building something into the forest, the landscape and the forest, the trees as a reference point, not the culture. At the end, if you look at these historical references, these are like mountains in a way. The head of Karl Marx is an enormous bronze mountain in a way. No? That is, you look in with a certain abstraction. In fact, there is a big museum, a paleontological museum, that is transforming, explaining this transformation in between trees into stones. So this is the museum nearby the head of Karl Marx, and this is really the outside, the front of the museum. With these are trees but stones. No? This is the paleontological pieces because the whole area is connected by all these kind of rich underground resources like petrol and chalk and all these things. So it's a kind of forest made in stone. This is what I wanted to do. It was a kind of ironical but not ironical, pragmatical and political also decision, trying to introduce this kind of reference in between the three, and with roots and this kind of these three levels of the trees, and also to connect with the bank problem, that is a big treasure and something that is changing from one side to the other in between the trees. And the whole argument of the project is connected to this shape, and also is connected to this idea of using materials. In a way, it has been absolutely strong and difficult to deal in such a long distance. For instance, the shape was also very interesting too in terms of structure. So, for instance, this higher moment that is connected to the two vertical nucleus, I cannot explain the plan for security reasons. So you know, the security is something in Germany. It's a kind of a limit of the paranoical things. So it's a kind of two vertical. So that means that the whole building has to be very rigid, very protective, very close, very stone, absolutely no windows. So it's like in a certain way, like a prison, like a prison of the money. And so that these two vertical pillars, like concentrating all the circulations, of course, and from these two pillars we have these walls that are the concrete walls that, by handing this kind of steel pieces, you keep all this floor. So you have a fantastic ground floor with no columns at all. So because everything is hanging from above. So for instance, using the section in relationship to the resistance. The resistance, in a way, is a kind of reversion of the logic of the tree. The tree is, everything is going down the earth. Here, everything is going from the sky, from the air. And the building was something like that, like a mass of stone with translucent pieces, with translucent, like kind of massivity, like a bar of ice on the other hand, because it's in between strong and solid, but at the end it becomes like connected to fire and connected to the liquid and to fire also. So the whole thing is something like that, with stone and so that makes to us a long way of many years defining this kind of translucent. This is a kind of composite. We must force to patent, to make a new patent from this kind of composite element, that is a kind of new element with alabaster in between. So it's an enormous alabaster piece. Alabaster is a kind of material that is in between translucent and transparent and solid, and transparent, translucent, but it's also stone. Was used in the medieval time and so on. So it's a kind of composite element using the alabaster as a main nucleus, like this one. This is in the factory, not in the factory, in the laboratory for testing. So this is the whole thing. A little bit later, This is so the whole facade in this kind of translucent pieces is like a snow in a way. No? The facade, the stone, is transformed into a kind of frozen area, into a frozen piece, something like that. This is very ugly. These some elements, all the stones are absolutely some local ones. It was a kind of conscious play on game, being absolutely local, absolutely heavy, absolutely connected to this kind of landscape, paleontological thing. So, for instance, this is a Saxon stone. The windows are a mixture in between wood and bronze. So it's always having some kind of natural elements, like this one. These are fantastic ones, and fantastic one. And at the entrance, the whole space is using all this argument. I hope it has not been a caricature, but the argument of this kind of inorganic and organic connection. These are also pieces with some kind of stones into it. This is a very strange wall made in wood. We are going to explain. This is an enormous art piece that is also made in a very craftsmanship system. There is also after being working so long, the whole project has to be something like it has to use a kind of craftsmanship, a crazy nightmare in a way. No? So, for instance, this is an enormous art piece that is going to be painted by one of the biggest Czech painters that is doing like that. So he's going to be painting like half a year. So because it's so big, so this is not, he's not going to use a picture and a photograph and something, but he's just painting and painting like in the medieval times. And for instance, in a way, this is the same way we use the wood in this kind of big space in between. The wood, we use the wood as taking the trees as a references. For instance, these are the trees. You cut the trees here, so you cut the trees here, and you have some, let's say, some transformation of organic thing into a geometrical surfaces. And from that, we put the trees like if they were animals on the walls. This kind of head of the animals, I guess. So you put the trees one after the other, and this kind of surface is going to be just decorated, and also for acoustic reasons. But this kind of wooden remains, so the result is going to be something like that. So there's different possibilities of trees doing that. At the end, we are going to put one tree after the other, so changing the character, because normally in the modern times, this kind of wood panels are absolutely artificial in a way. In this way, we are going to have the really direct trees there. So continuing this metaphor all the time, continuing this metaphor in between organic and inorganicity. And in this moment, I'm going to start this kind of convention center complex. This is I have to say, a project has been built. It's going to be finished in 4 months. We started 2 years and a half ago, and we have been involved in this kind of crazy process in between being designing and building all together in a way. We started with no idea on the facades, for instance. We started with the foundation plans, with no idea on facades, and so on. And this is a huge project. It's one of the biggest in Spain, and so for instance, it's a big hotel. 500 bedrooms, big, not very big, but quite big for the scale of the office tower. The convention center is 85,000 square meters and so on. Several questions connected. One is the way we do, the fast track way of doing. This I'm going to explain later. Some other questions. Again, a situation in between sea and land. So we are confronted to this kind of, let's say, landscape, natural landscape. This is the border in between the city and the sea. second question, the city. Several interesting questions connected to the urban position of the whole piece. So this is the diagonal. Maybe somebody of you know Barcelona. This is diagonal, very important street crossing the whole city. This is the Cerdà grid. Now it's a little bit here restored, and this is the end of the diagonal arriving to the sea. Here, of course, we see another line, this one, that is, it was an old trace of an old road going in parallel to the sea. This is the Teulat Street name. This is the motorway that in the area is underground. So the motorway is here, making a kind of tour of the city. So we have all this kind of different urban, this is a kind of previous trace, 19th century thing, 50s housing district, 80s motorways, and so on, and the sea, of course, all the time there, and the sea and the city. Another question is the program. The program is this convention center is one of the ugliest and dramatically terrible buildings in all the world. So I had to visit. I had the opportunity. I have to say, I have to say the opportunity to visit many of them. And unfortunately, I have to say that this is the building when globalization ended in a kind of non-end architectural nightmare in a way. So it's a kind of places with no place really, like this kind of Marcos's no place. I mean, no consistency, flexibility is like events that could be even in the -20 underground. Basically, they wanted, I mean, the organizers like to be in the -20 underground because there are no outside conditions. All the times it's homogeneous. So you go directly from the airport to these places, and you are there or here or in Barcelona or somewhere else. And so it's one of the most dramatic examples of the globalization times into bad architectural products in a way, no? So this, because there are buildings, they have no tectonical, by definition, they have no tectonical consistency in a way, because they wanted to be, they wish to be just flexible ones, so nothing stands there, so they can be for 2,000 people, or the other day with big dinner, and the other day it's like a kind of a film plateau, film making area. But at the end, these kind of areas have more interest than the convention centers. That on the other hand, they wanted to be a little bit domestic and nice and so on. They are not so industrial. So a disaster one. So a total disaster thing as a program in relationship to other things like hotels and offices. That in principle they are not the most important architectural buildings in our contemporary time. So this is the program. The program I would like to explain it, but maybe I can explain it a little bit later. The program as a contemporary, really contemporary banality, extreme banality. For having a kind of, this is when the first document we produced when we started the project. One of the first documents we produced. It was a kind of invocation of the spirit of the place in a way, like a kind of invocation of the genius loci in the old times. So, and this is the history of the place in terms of construction. This place was used in the 50s, I mean 50s and 60s, so 40 years ago, not so long ago, as a place where the immigrants from the south of Spain, they put their houses in the beach, So this is a fantastic, let's say, organic, so fantastic in terms of artistic, let's say, no? I'm sure not in terms of quality of life. But like this is in a way the architecture is a kind of condensation of the sun of the beach. So it's a kind of this all these houses like a kasbah in the north of Africa. So it's a kind of organic activity on the beach as a first colonization on the area. A little bit before, this area was used as a camp for shouting, for killing the people after the Civil War. So it was also some kind of memory on that. But as a physical fact, this kind of organic condensation of the sun. This changed because it was destroyed in the 60s and transformed into this kind of social housing project. And that was named Polígono. There are named Polígonos, so it's a geometrical, with this kind of geometrical energy in opposition to this kind of amorphous geometry coming from the previous, from the organic and vernacular way of doing. So, but this is also a very interesting neighborhood in terms of design. It's a kind of naive Mies van der Rohe, early Mies van der Rohe versions in the 50s, but this I think is full of interest, this kind of geometrical pattern. So we had this kind of organic vernacular trends, inorganic and geometrical and design trends as two energies coming from a certain reading of the history. So there were some first things connected to that. So some kind of geometry that were like a magmatic presence coming from the earth, from these first things happening, and also thinking in having skins. That could be connected to this kind of inorganicity of the polygonal, of the geometrical area part. This is more connected to something more organic, connected to the beach. This is something, but we stop and we continue later with this argument. In other terms, because such a heavy thing has to be, in our contemporary times, pragmatically very radical. So in this way, this is connected to this diagram. This diagram that is organizing the whole thing. This diagram is explaining the way we propose and we have built, we are building this problem. We divided the area in three bands. One is connected to the city, and this is named is the area with the skyscrapers and the office tower and the hotel is going to be. This is clearly the part more close connected to the city. Is clearly the more let's say inorganic, artificial and inorganic part. So this is A. B is the big exhibition space. The program at the end we had as a convention center, we had a big exhibition space and a lot of services to this exhibition space. So the B, that is the big exhibition space, that is was thought as a big square open to both sides. So and this is just a cover, closing a space, but with possibilities of expanding both sides and having the space in continuity with the, let's say, outside public space. And C, of course, there are all the facilities connected to the big to the central hall, entrance area, restaurants, conference rooms, and so on. Such a primitive and strict and primitive, maybe clear also diagram is the center of the composition of the whole thing. In parallel to that, we built a kind of phantom model. So it's not a model; it's just a kind of strategical model in order to connect this kind of strategical principle of use of the land in terms of form, in terms of scale. So this was this kind of band connected to the city. This is the big square, the big space with the models explaining the wish of continuity on both sides. And this is the facilities with several distinctions in texture and form, thinking that there were a lot of things there. And it was not going to be so easy to to put into one single form. Here you see the beams, because this we wanted, and they wanted also, but we wanted also to make a space without columns, a big space without columns. So I mean the beams appears as a kind of architectural volumetrical question. This is connected to a big urbanistical park with Acevillo. Mr. Acevillo, as Moses has explained, the architect, chief architect of the city is involved, has been involved. This is the Herzog and de Meron piece. This is Alejandro Zaera Park. This is a beach area, so it's a big. I'm not going to explain. This is a big continuity of outside spaces like beaches, park, recreation area, covering a kind of industrial activities. They are there, industrial facilities that's here. And but my building is connected to the city and also open to the a big park and after to the sea, because the underground the motorway is underground here, so there's a kind of continuity. Okay. So you see a little bit more the developments of that, and here appear the developments of this principle of the three bands. And here start appear something that I have to say to me has been a tool also to design, is using the structural plan as a tool for designing, this as a strategy for designing. So for instance, this is the band of the city area with this is a hotel until here, and this is the public areas of the hotel. This is one of the biggest. The whole thing is very high for the Barcelona standards. So this is the big with the rooms and so on, and this is the office building here. The volumetry is dealing with the fact that they are making like a wall, but they are I did refuse to make a wall, so having the opportunity, having the possibilities, having light from one side to the other. And I said the structure to me has been a fundamental tool for dealing with this. They are for private clients, two different ones. And the plans, they are into this band of the 20 meters, band, urban band, with a hotel here, the office tower. Next to the convention center is a continuity of services here. And there is a floor with the whole thing changed and a new landscape appears. This is going to appear a little bit later. I'm going to explain a little bit later. The hotel is like a wall with holes, using the same stone but with different finishing. So it's like a really heavy piece. This kind of inorganic argument at the end here it was the most evident occasion of dealing with that. So this is the hotel with the different, the same stone with different finishing, and dealing with the light in different ways. So you see, this is the hotel. But I wanted to say that the whole thing is also a key question is cutting the buildings into the middle, more or less, and the whole for arranging a kind of landscape very high. So into this kind of intermediate level, the building change of profile, and even the structure is changing because the whole thing here again is supported in the top. So this is, for instance, this is the big pillar, the big beams, and they are hanging here, and here we have no pillars again. And this is also happening in the hotel. So it's a kind of cutting into two. And this was a very, so for instance here, so this is this is provisory. Now they are really taking out this kind of portion here, and the whole area is going to be a big garden with a big swimming pool into the floor 14 or 15 here. So this is this area. The other is the office building. This is the center, the nucleus with concrete, arriving until the top. And here again is going to happen the same. It's a kind of changing of level that is also dealing, in my opinion, very well with the difference of visions of these two buildings. but they are going to be seen very far away from the city. And in this case, we are just going to see this kind of upper portions. Some visions. This is inside. The inside are like clinical things with a very sophisticated way. And these are the structural plans from the office building. This is a more, let's say, a model from. This is concrete. This is two layers of glass. So it's going to be really like a bulb, light bulb, and this is the concrete element with all these kind of small windows in order to have light inside. This is we are working with the artist Sylvia Herning for defining the colors at night from this kind of elements like windows. These are going to be visible from the diagonal, from the whole city. The two layers glass from the upper part. In this way, the whole thing is going to be very abstract with no windows. The windows are going to be inside, and the second skin is going to just to act as a protecting against the sun and against the wind also, and having this kind of movement of the air in between. So you open here, but the other layer is a very abstract one, a little bit white also. It's going to be like a big lamp at night. So this is this area. The second element is the big hall. This big hall that is this kind of square crossing, going from one side to the other, with the big beams. The big beams are used also for having light inside and having all the ducts and the ventilation and all the services. It's a very refined and very complex problem that I'm not going to explain, but it's very exciting also how to connect all these things in a way. In this it's like also like in the anatomy. I mean, in the bones there is a lot of things going into the bones. So and also it's happening like that. In the bones, the big beams, a lot of things happening inside, and they also one thing is happening is having the opportunity of having light on the space. So this is one part of the space, another part of the space with big rooms there and a big garden. I'm going to see later. The space is this kind of flexible thing, but the radical reversion it was opening everything. So it was changing the condition of the underground -20 to a ground floor absolutely open in a way, with natural light and open to the landscape and of course with possibility of being closed, but also with possibility of being open. This is a space with 15,000 square meters with possibility of having 15,000 people there, so it's an enormous thing. This is another version of the structure as a tool. I'm not going to develop that, but believe me that the structure, I mean the engineering of the structure, is could be a key question for defining such crazy things. So for surviving into such a crazy situation. So this is, for instance, these are the big pillars connected to the big beams, and all of them are connected to the static, to the installations and so on. And this is a kind of very clear, and I love this. We have been working a lot on that. But this kind of clarity that even has the condition of building such quickly. More plans, more events connected to the structure in a way. I also, because at the end architecture is a kind of archaic activity in a way. Being able of dealing up with this beam was a kind of big party for everybody involved there. So because it's 90 meters of beam, so it's a kind of made in with three different factories put together, and after putting up, it was like a big event. So this kind of, let's say, archaic things that in a way are also connected to our job in a way. This kind of dealing with the gravity force and winning against the gravity force also, and flying against the gravity force has been always a kind of wish, aspiration of all the builders and all the architects. Icarus was the first architect, was an architect also, this flying man. No? And the inside, some kind of inside, the spaces are kind of huge, because I said the non-tectonical fact, because this is a kind of just a space, and everything is, so the roof, for instance, is fundamental, I mean the ceiling, with this kind of translucent ceiling, with having all the ducts and the light, the artificial light, and even the floor. The floor is like sand. I'm going to say later. So you see this is the presence of the natural light in between. This is the artificial, and this is the presence of different things into this kind of continuity. Of course, this is a space that is going to be defined and organized by the enormous movable walls that they are very impressive, also acoustically treated and so on, and they're going to be able to divide and transform the space into a smaller one. So, for instance, so this is the end, one of the sides end with, I said, at the end this big space is organized by the light and let's say the conditions like acoustic. The acoustic is has been studied a lot. We have studied a lot of the acoustic of this big thing, and the mechanical installations and like cold, warm, and so on, and light, artificial light, and so on. But also the materials. The materials is just this false ceiling and the pavement. The pavement is like the beach. It's like the beach, like sun, like sun in the beach. And the openings to the outside. So this is the opening to the outside. You are going to see later. The roof is like a mineral landscape. So this was the big element, and after we are going to be confronted to the other services with all the entrance and meeting rooms and so on. This is the three parts. The services, the big hall, and the towers. Here the game is changing. The game of the whole project is changing because we were confronted, as I said at the beginning, not just to the inorganicity of the city, but to the organicity of the sea and to the landscape. So the whole thing is taking another thing. So in fact the structure is very clear. Also, it's 130 meters span for meeting conference rooms and foyer, and a very complex small thing area with small facilities here, with having light in a special way from the rear part. So it's again, but structurally again is, in a way it was very simple. It was 90 meters span, 10 and 30. So and the whole thing is, the span is the fundamental thing. The dimension you have to win, you have to cross. So, but this next to this kind of a structure, the skins are playing another game, and dealing with another kind of geometry, are dealing with another kind of problems, are dealing with this kind of organicity of the problem of the sites. For instance, the roof. The roof is a kind of version of the Jaima, because the space is going to be, it's the only that is going to be more organic in the top. It's a big restaurant, and so on the whole roof is a kind of Jaima. This kind of better tense, but also in relationship, that has to be seen in relationship to the mountains, and as in parallel to the mountains, and in opposition or in dialogue to this industrial thing. The whole facade, we're developing some kind of strategies for making a kind of movable facade. There was we had to invent many tools. This was an enormous model. But you could change the geometry of these lines in order to define the figure, and because the whole thing is made in a kind of panels, in order to be, it has to be industrialized in order for the time pressures, and this kind of new possibilities of industrialization that you can make. 1,000 panels, all of them different and they can be also industrialized, because for using the computer tools. So and the panels are kind of aluminum panels with different finishings, with different kinds of holes and different kind of incisions into them. So this is a kind of panel But on the other hand, they were very easy to hand and to put. No? So they were like an industrial thing put on the add to the structure. No? Somebody bought all these pieces from the panels, because we made a lot of holes into the small holes, and they made a kind of this a kind of fashion people that made like Paco Rabanne's versions on fashion dresses. This is something just for explaining a little bit the texture of the whole thing. So this is a kind of sequence of different holes, and this is a different incisions into the panels. No? So each panel is different at the end, and the whole thing is making a kind of planet thing. For example, in some occasions, this is also allowing to control the light going into. The whole structure is also working like that. This kind of making like small holes into all the surfaces. So this is the west facade. We have seen the window, the space from the inside. With this is the kind of sun protection from that. And this is a kind of interesting, this kind of small movements in relationship to the movement of the whole thing. The sea is there. This is the south facade with the big restaurant there, and and you see the way of putting this. So that you put there, and after the whole thing is appearing as a continuous skin with different degrees of transparency or translucency. The whole thing is changing. This is the south next to the garden and next to the sea. This is changing towards the main entrance that is faced to the Herzog and de Meuron building. There, the building is changing the language, and here what I'm trying to explain is basically the big structural fact. So the whole thing is just we explain the big beam and the big industrial and technical decisions, like in a ship or something like that. It's not decoration. It's not architectural decoration. It's just a structure what is going to be seen, and a big cantilever terrace. That is going to be here, this one. This big cantilever terrace. This is the end of the big space, and you're going to see how we are going to close that. This is the hotel. This is the entrance. The structure of this big piece, cantilever piece, is or hanging from above or hanging from the rear. So it had two series of pillars, let's say. One is coming from here, and after they are going to from above. And the finishing of these things are like a broken materials, just for not competing with the structure, just dealing, having the preeminence of the structure. So for instance, this is the big platform of the big terrace in the first floor where the main conference rooms are. Of course, we propose to have an enormous outside space for the conference rooms, having conference or having the possibility of being outside. The climate, of course, is positive for that. And this is but I said all the finishing here and there with the big facade are like broken elements. In this case, it's a kind of platform with wood and glass. So like here, so it's again like pieces of wood and glass, and having this kind of possibility of having the outside as a meeting point, and also adding some kind of textile sun protections in order to formally increase this kind of perception. The whole square is also combined by the big screen with LEDs in order to introduce some kind of tension in between this kind of more leisure area into more informational platform. This is the Herzog and de Meuron building in my version on the drawing. Because it's, and this is again this kind of broken wooden element, the broken wooden platform. That The title of the name of the building is going to be this kind of letters like Arabic, vaguely. Basically, it's like a continuous line, and also acting as a fence from the terrace. This is the big screen. These are another branches of the screen. This is the platform like how it is now. This is the platform and the entrance. You entered from above this big platform, and this you are confronted to. This is a big movable door, closing and opening from the big hall, and they designed in a core 10. This is this kind of corrugated, oxidated steel. But also using the same technique of eroding, destroying the unity of the pieces. So, also thinking this place was the place where the people were put in the 50s after the war for being killed. We have this where we defined this kind of points and relationship of this kind of shouting facts. No? Inside, some inside elements. So there are the big conference rooms in the first floor. With you have to imagine here a kind of movable going into this wall, movable panel wall, not panel wall because they are acoustically treated and so on. This is at the end of this space. This is a kind of special space that everything is going to be in boots. This is the lobby. The lobby and the whole building is cut in the middle with a kind of garden. That in the lobby is going to be a garden, an aerial garden in between two sheets of glass, and after it's going to be a regular garden. So this is the garden here in between two sheets of grass and some light, and after here. We are going to have a regular garden in the first floor. So this kind of coating, this kind of coating. This is this kind of coating that is coating. This is another strategy for destroying the box in a way. It just was coating the box. This is another possibility for destroying the isolated and silent box. So this is, you see, this is the kind of garden but light element here from the lobby. We cross, this is going to be everything with the green elements, and after we continue with this piece is going to be a garden, and after this is continuing towards into the hotel, arriving into the other side. So it's a kind of incision in the whole project. This is the big lobby. The big lobby is an enormous space, it's 4,000 square meters with nothing. And I was very worried on how to deal in terms of not tectonics, in terms of space of that. We have this garden, suspended garden, but I thought it was not enough. And we are working with the artist Cristina Iglesias, that I hope she's now here because she made an exhibition some months ago. I think she's now today here. Of course, she said to me yesterday. But she's doing a kind of artistic intervention that I found absolutely exciting in relationship to the logic of my project also. That is, the problem is how to define as a space with nothing, in a way, with no material, with no furniture, or worse, with horrible furniture that is going to appear in the next future. How to define architecturally a space without defining, let's say, the tectonics of the space. And the question is something like that. We are defining. We are making like a kind of suspended jealousy with that at the end, because we have been working a lot with the light electrical things. The most important thing of the space is going to be the light, but also the shadow. The shadow of the space is going to be defined by the shadow of the contrast in between light and non-light. I mean by the shadows. So these are the monsters that we have been working for defining, that could be the piece, something that is suspended. This is a very big one. It's 2,000 or 2,000 or more square meters piece in bronze, and it's a certain even craftsmanship into it, defining like a virtual text. But the whole space is going to be defined by this kind of continuous shadow. In a way, activities are going to happen into this kind of rain of light. And so in this case, maybe activities, any kind of activities could be possible into a space with a certain architectural specific condition, not a generic, not with no qualities space. It's another kind of suggestion. Thank you very much. Thank you. Maybe you have some questions? Can we try to answer?
Could we have the lights on, maybe, please? It's fantastic to see that in the end you're making something very poetic out of the banality of the convention center. So that is. But I think maybe before people get their thoughts together to ask one or two questions. Throughout, and I mentioned this a little bit at the beginning, you're working often with these dualities of, like here with the convention set and the permanence, and then the ephemeral condition of the light and so on. But specifically, many times you also refer to this organic, inorganic.
Yeah.
And with the hotel and with the interiors, with the wood and so on.
Why? Can you explain why I am interested in them? So, in a way, in many occasions I am interested in developing and first noticing them, and after trying to use. But a kind of clear, in my opinion, duality in something that what I said, organic and inorganic. What's that? This organic. Organic is all this kind of natural world connected to life. This kind of natural, like trees, animals. This part of the life into the earth that we name organic in a way. At the end, this is connected to a kind of question that could be even seen, even referring to being here in London. I remember London when I was young in the 60s, connect with things happening like archigram, all these kind of things. And at that time, these kind of things, I was very young, like you are now, but I remember one argument was this kind of tension between life and architecture. So what's life? What's architecture? Important is life, and let's say the banality is the architecture. That the architecture in parallel, that could be like academic, solid, rigid. No life at the end of the process. So this is a kind of. This is also coming back to the argument. So there's something connected to life. Not just human life, but in a way, general life, and something connected to no life, to death, in a way. For instance, you remember Adolf Loos said something that was difficult to me to understand, that I think now I understood, that architecture was connected to death, because he was sent to the tomb, to the monuments. At the end, it was a kind of provocation in a way also on the other hand, to the monuments, because architecture is connected to the monuments, and real life, in a way, architecture is impossible to deal with it. So it's again another argument connected life and death, organic, inorganic. In a way, at the end, organic could be something this kind of, in terms of plastic also, formal terms could be continuing this argument. Organic could be, let's say, set in a kind of non-geometrical pattern, in a way, no? So like this kind of fractal figures and altos, Altos at the end it was something named organic architecture in the 50s, or Altos things, pulses, curves, and all this kind of thing. And on the other hand, we have the geometry as a expression of the inorganic. The inorganic is the stone. The stone is something, this is this kind of metaphor has a lot of readings. For instance, the stone as something that is connected to the death, so it's as a grave, so no life into it. Permanence and the permanence of the architecture. In the postmodern was a kind of idea, so the permanence, everything there, the stone architecture. This is a kind of connection. So I'm trying to classify and to understand, all those, but I found all these kind of dualities full of architectural interest in a way. And to me, I was also in these two projects because I've been talking, and this picture, for instance, the picture of the houses in the beach, on the beach and on the big blocks. It is a very strong and powerful picture, but in a way it's explaining also this. So it's houses on the beach, vernacular architecture, no architects there, no plan, nothing, is just the sun a little bit more solidified just as shelter. And after the geometry, architecture, and the state appears, and they appear this kind of geometrical thing. It's also funny because in Spain these things are named polygons. Polygons, so they are described by the geometrical facts. So I am interested in that, yeah, because I am interested because I all the time this kind of tension coming from the 60s, that architecture is connected to life, and it's a kind of, that means it's a kind of more ephemeral thing, and a kind of, it appears at the end that's could end in a desperation of the architecture in a way. I remember the postmodern times that were very difficult to me because I was confronted just with tombs in a way. So now I am trying to use this kind of duality. That I think is, for instance, the project in Cambridge. The project in Cambridge had to be a tomb, clearly. Had to be a tomb. Had to be a closed, fixed element. Had to be protective, just a stone. And the bankers, German bankers, and then no, but they could imagine, and you could imagine them, and there's everything close, protective. It's just really like being into a tomb. And this kind of duality gave to me some kind of irony in one hand, some kind of freedom in the other, some kind of alibi in some other cases, even to them, and some kind of tools. It was a kind of, at the end, theories or ways of thinking. I had to be confronted into the practice and to the possibilities of doing things, and to me has been useful to make these distinctions. But it's a long talk. but maybe something else.
Any questions?
So, good night.
No, don't run away. It just takes a little bit of time for them to warm up.
Okay.
They will ask questions.
Okay.
Raul, were you going to raise your hand or no?
Yes.
Can we just wait for?
I enjoy it actually, the way you turn the banality of the Congress Center into something that is a very fine use, I think, of abstraction. What is the program you have for all these surfaces and the rain of light as you use it? Is there a kind of continuity, like a narrative continuity in the use of the text, the rain of light, the garden, or do they come almost haphazard? Like when you meet a spot, you think of something.
You mean in the lobby, this kind of?
No, you know what, everything. Then on one side you have the skin of the crinkly skin, on the other side you have the letters, then you have the rain of light, then you have the stone facade.
Yeah.
It's a kind of a program of materiality that runs.
It was a kind of contextual program. There are many arguments, but in one hand it was a kind of a contextual argument also, connected to this kind of different materials, especially into the north side, into the city, into the because at the end it's a huge thing. So it's, at the end the scale is also very important. So this kind of broken vocabulary, it's because. So I try to explain many things to this. So one is you are into a big street and a new street that is the fence somehow. And it's a street that is also is not a normal street because it's going to be a kind of very seen from the long distance into the long distance because they are very high. So this kind of two scale. So I try to react in a way with a certain freedom to different problems with different languages in a way. No? It was a kind of reaction into a kind of general plot that was this kind of or transition in between city and sea, explaining and not explaining but building that, then building this fact. At the end it's something that in many occasions I try to, more than imposing something, trying to build something that is almost existing there, not being against the logic of the facts. This is a transition in between city and sea. So it's how to build into a big scale with this kind of transition that is the fact in a way. It's existing but with no architecture explaining or dealing that. I am really. This is a general argument into my work. I'm really interested in trying to follow arguments that at the end appears quite evident and almost existing there. So, and architecture, but architecture in many occasions is so stupid that it's dealing against in a way. It's dealing against with no logic. At the end, there's a kind of a contextual logic is also very important in all my work and also here. Also here. Maybe it was just a part of the question. But in a more detailed way, for instance, into the lobby, for instance, there are many things, the garden and the letters there and so on. What is important there is everything is happening on the roof in a way. The space is empty. There is nothing there, but the interest, the center of the interest is on the roof, on the roof and the light crossing the roof, crossing this kind of filter that is there. It was an idea of defining a flexible space at the end, because at the end all these buildings with the flexibility is the main question. At the end, the flexibility is really maybe dealing with life, but it's dealing against any solidification of life, any architecture at the end. So again, it's going to be like nothing. I was really disappointed because this building is going to be run by a specialist company or so on that in a way, and I am not it's real life in a way. So I'm not. They are not going to be. They don't like me. I hate them. They hate me, and they are going. So it was a kind of possibility of controlling the situation, even if they try to change everything. So because there even in this sense, I try to use also the aura that art, for instance, the art has some kind of aura and some kind of metaphysical power, this kind of aura, and the architecture has no more any more aura. So it's a pragmatical thing and so on, and it's very exciting somehow. But on the other hand, so I use this art piece started with try to really fight against my clients. So we are going to organize a space, but you are not going to kill the space, even if you are going to put a lot of garbage, horrible furniture, horrible things, and big advertisement, big horrible. I mean, because at the end, these kind of flexible spaces are very weak because they have no consistence. At the end, what is organizing the space is just maybe it's the furniture, or is the graphic design on the walls. And if you don't control that, and I'm not going to control everything, of course, you can really lose the battle. So it was a kind of trying to define a space in parallel with a lot of flexibility. It was a kind of a strategical tool. Okay. Some questions? No more questions.
Well, I think the question that Raul was asking in terms of the logic of sort of bringing things together, which you try to answer, in some ways it's very key, because when I ask you about the organic, inorganic, there's one way where you need the sort of representational qualities of that kind of duality, you know, because that makes certain sort of meaning. But on the other hand, the distance from that is also important, because sometimes if it becomes too literal, it's the literality is like a kind of postmodern, because it becomes too direct.
Yeah.
And what I suppose is also, you know, implied in the question is the manner in which you construct the nuances of the narrative in some ways, because it's, you know, if you talk about the holes in the wall where people were shot on that side, on the one hand, this is something very strong, but on the other, if it's literal, you say, well, that's the side, and people used to be shot, so we have holes, it's like shooting out of the thing. And I think what would be good to also have you speak about that is the way in which you construct both your proximity to some of these narratives, but also in some ways your distance, because you also don't want it to be too direct and too literal. So how do you gauge that?
These things are metaphors in a way also somehow. Metaphor is a world with not very success in architecture in a way, and I understand why. But at the end, there are like metaphors, really metaphors, like in language. So there are things that are connected to your problem, but they are not your problem. They are not because at the end, architecture has a lot of another kind of demands. So the logic of construction, for instance, that is very strong. The logic of, for instance, when you decide something like this kind of metaphorical thing, that in a way appears together, so it was not a direct idea. So the idea was just in front of the structure, of the clarity of the structure, what we add next to the structure, like in the floor or in the facade, are going to be like broken pieces, not Unitarian pieces, in order to give to the structure the energy of the composition, the protagonism on the whole composition. And after this kind of metaphorical things appear somehow, this kind of idea of the shooting and so on. But after, you are also confronted to the physical problems of the facts in a way. For instance, you have a piece of steel, this kind of corten steel, for instance. How to put a hole? How to put is not infinite. It's not infinite the way you can put a hole there. So because you have to put not in the corner, in the center with a certain division, and it's a kind of other logic in between pragmatics, in between constructive, but also in between also sensitive. It's also artistic. It's another kind of artistic experience on how to make a whole at the end. I mean, there are many art. For instance, I remember Richardson said, Smithson said, to dig a hole could be a work of art. So to make a hole into this piece could be also a work of art. So it's another kind of logic connected to the material, to the factibility, to the, I don't know, to the dimension of the pieces. I don't know. It's a kind of another kind of logic connected to the reality of the material facts. That this is a logic that I try to follow, that I am really excited for following. Like how to make a hole into a sheet of steel. and I forget. In this moment, I forget all the everything.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.